Crazy exes. We've all had them, or we've had friends that have had them. Is there anything legally you can do to restrain them, to stop them, to make them go away? Today we're going to talk about that on #Lawyered, what your options are both civilly and criminally when dealing with your crazy ex. Welcome back to #Lawyered, everybody. We got Andrea and I here in the studio and talking about a subject it's actually a lot of fun, but the fact that it's pretty true for a lot of people, I don't know, it makes it somewhat like a little bit of dark fun because it's so true that people deal with crazy exes.
Hey, look, I've had at least one crazy ex and one who thought he was my ex, but we were never together, but he was really creepy and stalkerish.
See, that's good. We have one of our hypotheticals we're going to go through later. Is it hits right in that realm.
Yeah.
Probably a little less innocent than that one was.
Oh,
but
okay.
The reason we came with this idea is in my office, we get a few calls a month from people saying, hey, my ex-girlfriend, my ex-boyfriend, they're doing this. They're texting me all the time. Is there anything I can do? They're saying these things. 90% of the time, my answer is no. Usually there's not a whole lot we can do or you can do legally other than ignore them, block them, do all the practical things that you should do if someone's
block them on your DMs,
Right.
block them from your texting, which I learned very quickly how to do.
Yeah. And that's maybe we start the show off with the practical advice. If they're doing things like that, just block them. Far less expensive, far less time consuming. Just try to cut them out of your life as best you can.
Absolutely. If you need to change your phone number, change your phone number.
Yeah. And there's a lot of assumptions, I think, that happen in this area of law, especially with the term stalking and
stalking
harassment.
is horrendously overused. There's a colloquial term of what stalking is. And then there is like actual literal legal definitions of stalking.
Yeah, and it's going to be important that we distinguish that today.
For sure.
Because the term harassment, the term stalking, we use all the time colloquially and in jest a lot of times.
Yeah, I just use stalker-ish.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Although I think he was flirting with the line of legal stalking, frankly. But
well, and we'll talk about that. Maybe,
we will.
Maybe we'll dive
break it down.
into
Well, I was in high school at the time, so we'll break it down, and maybe he was.
Perfect. Well, so today we're going to cover criminally what can be done. How does someone violate criminal statutes here in Texas? What civil options you have. And then we're going to talk through some situations and try to apply these concepts. And I'm going to walk you through them. I want to see what you think.
Great.
applies.
We can bring out some of my crazy exes.
Perfect. So let's talk about the criminal side first. And we're going to talk about 5 or 4 different criminal statutes we have here in Texas. First one is harassment.
Yes.
Now, harassment to me is one of the most vague and
very nebulous.
It's just not defined very well.
No.
And I think that you could classify almost any obsessive ex into this category because all you really need to do, we'll get into it, but all you really need to do is text somebody too many times and then you're there and it's Class B misdemeanor.
Or leave some nasty voicemails calling you all the bad names under the sun.
Well, and so I've represented a few people charged with harassment and it's usually been actually in all the cases, it was 2 grown men that were fighting over, and I mean fighting, arguing, texting, calling, whatever, over some woman, whether it's one of their ex-wives, one of their current wives, whatever it is. But like the little fight on text messages and emails and some of the voicemails that were left, it's like one of them went to the police station first, filed the harassment charges, and then they got charged with harassment. And I'm sitting in the prosecutor's office. I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, we're spending state money dealing with these 2 idiots who are fighting with each other.
These 2 dingbats over here.
Send them to civil court. Let them pay money instead of using our taxpayer dollars to fight this stuff. So harassment can be overused sometimes. And I think some DA's offices don't do a great job of really vetting those cases. But there are certain times where it is important to be there. So like I said, it's Class B misdemeanor, which means you can face up to 6 months in county jail, up to a $2,000 fine. And there's a bunch of ways that you can commit harassment in Texas. We're going to just focus on a few that I think really have to do with exes, where you're going to see this more often. One is you initiate communication, and during that you make a request or proposal that is obscene. So we're going to talk about that in one of our situations later, because I think on dating apps this happens quite a bit. You can threaten somebody in a manner that will reasonably alarm them, that you're going to inflict injury on them. You can cause the telephone of another to ring repeatedly or make repeated phone calls. We've heard about those situations before.
Oh, hello. That was absolutely my life for a while.
And then the last one, this is obviously geared towards text messages. You send repeated electronic communication in a manner reasonably likely to harass and alarm abuse, torment, embarrass, or offend.
Okay, so let's give an example. So you tell me if this is an example. So
Getting real personal here.
We're getting real personal.
Tone of voice is coming on
real
right now.
personal. Okay, y'all. So this is years before, Spencer, my husband, and I started even dating. So when I'm originally from California. I came back from my master's program in Russia, and I was working and finishing my dissertation while living back at home in California. Started dating this guy. Seemed really nice, and then I was like, hey, buddy, like, total transparency, I'm going to law school. Like, this is probably not going to be a permanent thing. This is when I'm leaving.
Right, here for a good time, not for a long time.
Yeah, here for a good time, not a long time. We'll date, keep it light, fun, happy, like,
how you
whatever.
Doing? Keep it moving.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And so, law school came, and I was like, okay, I don't really think this is going to be a permanent thing. Wish you the best. Had fun. This was great. Had fun hanging out with your friends, you with my friends. Wish you the best. Bye. Oh no. Not only did he apply and get in to a college in Texas that was as close as possible to Waco without actually being in Waco, he would text me on the hour, every hour, if not multiple times an hour. I had to turn my phone off in class because my phone kept ringing, and I almost got kicked out of class at one point.
Yeah.
And he was constantly texting me saying, where are you? This man had never been to Texas, let alone Waco. And he's like, where are you? I am studying in the Commons. Well, where are the Commons? How is he going to know where the Commons are? Or if it was at night, he's like, hey, I'm going to Cricket's to get, dinner with my girlfriends. Okay, well, where's Cricket's? How are you getting there from your house? And like, okay, well, who are you going with? And I was like, you don't know these people. These are my law school classmates. Yeah. And so finally I had to block him because, and this is finally after he called and left repeated voicemails on my phone calling me like all these terrible names because I wouldn't get back together with him, and had blocked him on text message because he was disrupting my studies.
That fits the exact definition of harassment in Texas.
Well, look at that.
So you could have filed criminal charges against him. I could have. And that would have been a legitimate, leaving those types of messages, continuing to send messages over and over again. It's a legitimate claim for harassment. That's the reason we have the statute.
Okay.
So that's not stalking. Some people, colloquially would say...
Oh, no, that's not the stalker experience. That one was in high school.
Oh, geez. Okay, so we got more stories.
And I was a minor.
Well, let's go right into stalking. So stalking is a third-degree felony.
Okay.
You can get 2 to 10 years in prison for this.
Oh, that's
nasty.
nasty.
If you have a previous conviction in Texas or another jurisdiction, it's a second-degree felony that pops you up to 5 to 20 in prison. It's TDCJ there. Now, this one, I actually had to read through this a couple times because I've never dealt with a stalking case because it's weird to charge people with stalking because of what it requires. Basically, the easiest way to explain it is you commit harassment, which we just talked about the definition of that, and then the person who does it, the defendant in this case, knows that their action will make the victim feel threatened by bodily injury, death to the victim's family, or a boyfriend or girlfriend they're dating, the victim is dating, or harm to the victim's property. So the person has to know that their actions would cause that fear, and they have to actually cause the victim to feel this, and a reasonable person, not the victim or defendant, would have to think, yes, I would also be reasonably threatened by those comments. So it's a lot of hoops to jump through, and that's why you don't see stalking prosecuted a whole lot.
That's interesting.
Because you'd have to actually make a threat to somebody that they thought was actually a real threat.
Does it have to be a very explicit threat, or can it be something that's implied?
Well, so it's not really written in the statute. So I think if you could prove it up.
Case law.
Right.
So let's give an example from my experience. Y'all are going to know me so well.
I thought we were going to talk about a lot of my crazy ex-girlfriends today. I'm really glad that we're diving into this.
We'll get into some of your crazy exes.
This is much better. So yes, tell us a tale.
Okay, tell you the tale of when Andrea was a teenager. Right. So I had been friends with this guy because I was like, oh, he doesn't have a lot of friends, but he seems like a nice kid. I'll be nice to him. Oh, how's it going? And so anyway, I was like, trying to be nice.
Sure. First mistake.
That was my first mistake. Yeah, there's a reason no one wanted to hang out with him because he was crazy. Very crazy. So anyway, long story short, I just, over the years, was nice, would ask how he was doing. Like, if, I would invite him to, group events because I was like, oh, I feel bad. It doesn't seem like he gets out that much, and maybe it'd be good for him.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a terrible idea because then he thought we were a thing. We never dated. We were never a thing. It was always group settings. I was like, no, we're not. Like, I would tell him multiple times, like, no, we're not together. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not dating you. I'm not dating anyone right now.
Sure.
And he's like, okay. But then finally it got to the point where he would start to call me and leave messages. And I was like, okay, these are kind of weird messages. And then he would say like, oh, I saw you at the store today. I'm like, well, I didn't see you at the store. He's like, oh, I saw you walking your dog today. I was like, what? And then, it escalated. And he's like, oh, I left you a present on your doorstep. And I was home alone at that point, and I was really freaked out. And y'all, my dog is a golden retriever. It's not like a pit bull or a German shepherd or anything. What's Sammy gonna do? Lick this guy to death? It's not a good home defense system. This guy had left his necklace on my front porch. And at that point, I was starting to really freak out. I was like, okay, now you're coming to my house when I'm home alone after swim practice with just my dog.
Yeah.
This is creepy. And then I was like, hey, buddy, can we maybe not do this? And then I started getting voicemails and text messages like, I locked myself in my dad's closet and I found his gun. You're lucky there are no bullets in there.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, And so finally at that point, I am calling my dad. I'm calling his parents. I was like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, geez.
But there's a gun involved, and I'm concerned, and I'm not leaving the house until this is resolved. Yeah. I'm locking all the doors and windows.
Yeah, I actually think that would actually, you could make a good argument for stalking at that point. I think you could also make a criminal trespass argument if he's coming onto your property like that and leaving stuff on the
Eventually
house.
It was resolved. It turns out I think he was pretty badly bipolar, and so he was put on medication. He was fine after that, but so that was my stalking experience.
Yeah. Well, and so, to me, you get close to there.
Yeah.
At least it makes an argument.
I call it stalking colloquially. Is it legally a stalking?
It may
be.
That's one of the closer ones I've heard, actually. Which is ironic given that we're talking about it live on the show. Mm-hmm. But, you are hitting some of those hoops because there was a threat about a gun and a reasonable person could be fearful of what that means. It at least would fit this next deal. And this is something I don't think they should have classified this as a terroristic threat, or they should have named this crime that we're about to talk about a terroristic threat, because it's kind of the same thing as using the word stalking. We use terrorism in a certain way in normal everyday language, and this doesn't involve any kind of terrorism.
This isn't, a white supremacist trying to blow up an abortion clinic or something.
Right. So terroristic threat is a Class B misdemeanor in Texas. Class A if it's done to a current dating partner or an ex-dating partner, which is interesting. And it's basically if someone threatens to commit any offense involving violence to a person with the intent to place that person in fear of imminent serious bodily injury. And so if you make a threat to somebody, and so there's a little bit of part of this can go into stalking, but it takes away some of those other requirements that he knows and that a reasonable person would feel threatened. It's just if you threaten somebody with the intent to place that person in fear of it.
So in my last example, when that person was saying, I found the gun, you're lucky there are no bullets in there, how would that measure up, do you think?
I could make the argument for that, if you could prove somehow that he intended to put you in fear, which, you probably make the argument he intended to put you in fear because he wanted you to respond to his messages, he wanted to date you or whatever.
I don't know.
Well, and that's, if you think about a terroristic threat, people get mad and make threats like that all the time in bars or over the phone, or people get angry and say things they shouldn't say, maybe in the terroristic threat category.
So let's give another example. This is not from my personal life. So Halsey and G-Eazy, right? Power couple.
I already like this example. Go ahead. I actually know about this couple.
Oh my gosh, yay!
She made that song, You Should Be Sad, when they broke up.
Yes, she did. Such a good song. Look at you, Mr. Pop Culture over there. So before they broke up, right, which they got together, broke up again for reals that time. So when they were still together, they did You and I, which was a super popular song. And then one of the lyrics in the song is, and I'm going to paraphrase here, it's something like, and G-Eazy's singing, he's like, if she ever, he's like, I would never be cheating if she ever caught me cheating. And then she chimes in, she's like, if I ever caught you cheating, I chop, nah. Or like basically saying that, she'd chop his what off.
Right.
And so I was like, ha ha, that's concerning.
You guys
what?
You guys are in a great place.
You guys are, maybe you want to like go to a therapist.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
But if someone, say you have Kimmy, not Kim Kardashian, just generic Kimmy from our State U drug charge sentencing guidelines
there you
episode.
go.
She's back.
Character's coming back into
Character is
I
coming back. It's
nice.
the first time we have a character reappearance. Kimmy, and then her drug dealing boyfriend Johnny.
Sure.
Wasn't it Johnny?
Yeah, we'll go with it.
No, let's just make a new one. She's dating Danny.
Okay.
Danny's a new boy. Anyway, so Kimmy gets wasted at a party one night and sees Danny making out with a girl, and she's like, oh my gosh, if I see you making out with a girl again, I'm gonna like chop your you-know-what off. Would that constitute a terroristic threat?
Sounds pretty terroristic to me.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think you can get there. I mean, it's like harassment, it's somewhat of a vague, it's less vague, but it's somewhat of a vague statute, but you're intending to place that person in fear of imminent serious bodily injury. Now, I will say, now that I say that out loud, this term imminent is in a lot of these definitions. Imminent means that like, if I say it, I could actually actively carry out the threat I'm making right
Okay,
now. So if she was brandishing a knife, if she didn't say the next time I see you, if she just said, I'm going to, and maybe she wasn't brandishing a knife, that makes it too easy to make that threat. But if she says that and then leaves the room and then stomps off and she's walking to the kitchen of this party, okay, maybe now at this point, it's a little easier because you can say, okay, she's about to actually try and do this,
Do you have any examples of an ex-girlfriend who made a terroristic threat?
I actually don't, luckily. No terroristic threats made towards me, or at least none that I recall, unless I blocked them out through PTSD. Yeah. Kind of like our law school episode last week.
Sounds like.
The last thing, I won't spend too much time on this because we talked about it in a previous episode, but the revenge porn statute we have in our state, which basically says if a girlfriend or boyfriend sends a image showing their intimate parts to their paramour, and then that is used and published to somebody else or published online or wherever with the intent to harm that person, you've committed revenge porn, which is a state jail felony, 6 months, 2 years in prison. And so those are really the main criminal laws that you could violate when you're dealing with ex-girlfriends, ex-boyfriends. Civil remedies, this part's pretty short, but I do want to draw this distinction. We have restraining orders in Texas, and we have protective orders.
Two very different
very
things.
Different. And people throw them around a lot, and they think, I need a protective order. So we'll talk about the protective order first. Protective order means that the court has to find that family violence has occurred and is likely to occur in the future.
And this is the most extreme of the options. And so there's a fairly high burden, wouldn't you say, in order to get this?
There is, because, and a lot of lawyers even, and this is, we deal with a lot of domestic violence at our firm on both sides of it, helping on the family law side or defending and accusations. And a lot of people forget the second prong. It's not just that there was one issue of family violence, it's that it's likely to occur again, therefore we need a protective order.
But what's interesting, right, though, is that if it's occurred again, it probably is likely to occur again if it's to this level, right? Because if we rewind to our episode with Tara Avance, the assistant DA, remember she talked about, and she deals a lot with crimes of violence against women, and which often result in domestic violence. And in strangulation cases or with wife beaters, these are very often repeat offenders. And it takes a woman, and I don't want to misquote her, but I'm vaguely recalling it takes a woman 4 to 7 times.
There's definitely more than twice, I know that.
Yeah, it's like she has to be attacked like 4 to 7 times before she is finally ready to tell herself, I need to get out, I need help to get away from this.
And in those extreme cases, I agree with you on that. But a lot of where you see the gray area is when you've got so because a threat. Well, let's go ahead and define family violence, and I'll come back to this, because family violence is defined in Chapter 71 of the Family Code as an act by a family member, dating partner, or ex-dating partner that causes physical harm or a threat that places the victim in fear of imminent harm, like we just talked about.
With Kimmy and Danny.
With Kimmy and Danny, this imminent threat. Now, the reason that this is a little more gray in the less extreme examples, because what Tara said and what you were just talking about, absolutely, it's likely to occur again because of the cycle. we get into a lot of situations, especially in divorces or in drunken arguments, where threats are made or certain actions are taken that don't really rise to the level of what we, in a practical sense, think of as physical abuse or physical violence. And so there's certain situations where protective orders are sought out and they're not really appropriate because, okay, maybe there was a drunken comment made that was threatening that shouldn't have been said. Not defending that comment. I'm not minimalizing that.
No, it's extremely hurtful and psychologically like very terrible, but it's not family violence.
Right. Is there a history of pattern of this occurring in the past? Is there a history of other domestic disturbances at this house? Let's say there's not. And so maybe, and this is all case by case, and it's hard to really think of a really good example without spending 10 minutes on it. But maybe this is a case where, okay, it's not likely to occur again in the future.
Yeah.
The reason that second prong is so important, the reason there's a high burden here is because protective order, unlike a temporary restraining order or a restraining order, which we'll talk about in a second, it says, okay, someone can't be within X amount of feet of you. They can't talk to you. They can't show up where you work. They can't do X, Y, and Z. They violate that, you can actually call the police and that person can be arrested on the spot because you show them the protective order, and violating a protective order is actually a criminal offense. That's why it's such a high burden, which is different than a restraining order, which, we've both got a lot of experiences with restraining orders.
Yes, we do.
Same kind of idea. You got to stay X amount of feet away from somebody. Don't contact them. There's other restrictions you can put on them. But if someone violates a restraining order, what happens?
I mean, you're in violation of the restraining order. You get slapped on the wrist. There's a fine involved. I mean, maybe
the cops aren't going to get involved.
Yeah. You go to the court and you say that this has been violated. They're in contempt of this TRO. We would like you to admonish this individual and or punish them, because then if you're in contempt of a court order, then you can be fined and or put into prison for a few days.
Right. Totally different than protective order. Cops show up, handcuffs,
exactly.
You're gone. Temporary restraining order, the cops show up, they're going to say, well, I can't. This is a civil order.
This is a civil order. I can't
Go
force
talk to your
this.
lawyer.
Yeah.
Go talk to the judge. And then, so it's not the same thing.
So you get hauled back into court. You're not getting hauled to the jailhouse.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of times where I've seen where someone will seek a protective order and the court says, you didn't get there, but both of y'all need to stay the hell away from one another. So we're going to issue a restraining order instead, because they don't want to make it criminal.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's a good example of something where you think a temporary restraining order would be helpful, right? Because we've described how high the burden is for a protective order, but for a restraining order, I mean, do you have an example from either your cases or your personal life? I've given 2 stories from my personal life, so it's time to share, Austin. Spill. Let's go.
Well, the first example that comes to mind for me is actually a case I mentioned earlier, where you got 2 grown men that are arguing with one another, and they just can't seem to stop because their egos and their
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah, so nobody needs a protective order there.
No.
They could probably do well with a restraining order that says stay away from one another. Don't continue on with this because you're putting your family through a whole lot of stuff that you don't need to be doing. So going into our situations here, and I've actually tried to title these in an appropriate way. So I call this first one Thumbs of Fury.
Thumbs of Fury.
Thumbs of Fury. And I will tell you that all of these situations are adaptations from either cases I've worked on or personal situations I've been in, or at least heard about. So,
shoot, I gave my actual real life stories.
I know.
Wow, maybe I should have made them hypos instead of giving my real life.
So, Thumbs of Fury, we've got Sean and Stacy. They were dating and broke up. Now, they should have probably seen some of the signs on the wall, because Sean, within the first month of dating, had to call the police because he got hit in the head with a vase.
That's disturbing.
They stayed together for love, naturally.
For love.
But after they break up, finally, after 7 months of dating, over the course of the next month, Stacy sends Sean 6,000 text messages.
That's a lot.
30 days. 200 messages a day.
That's a lot.
None of which were answered by Sean. Did not answer a single one. It's just left her on red the whole way through.
Ooh.
So
ouch. That's
she also,
mean.
on top of this, she showed up at his birthday party unannounced, uninvited.
Oh.
She numerous times parked outside his house and said she was not going to leave until he came out and talked to her. Emailed and Snapchatted her countless times on top of the 6,000 text messages, and continually quoted the 1 Corinthians love verse to him, pleading with him to get back together with her.
Are you serious?
I am very serious about this.
What?
1,000% serious. So,
okay, I have to know, is that a personal experience, that last one?
This is a case experience.
That's a case experience.
Case experience.
Wow.
It's a case experience. And what's funny is I've talked to some of my friends who talk about getting self-conscious if they've sent 2 unanswered text messages. for one thing, to send 200 messages in a day, I mean, that's pretty fast.
How do they not, like, don't you get, like, tech thumb from doing that? Is
I
that
don't know.
going to
She
hurt?
probably built up some stamina with this. I mean,
Built up some stamina.
you got to get into playing shape for this kind of performance, you know? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Once in a lifetime.
Now, I will tell you the funniest part about this is when I asked her, because I thought she was going to kind of be cagey with me on the stand about sending 6,000 messages unanswered. And she's like, yeah, I did. That's my number. And I kind of did
That's it?
I kind of go, okay. I was expecting somebody to push back a little bit more on that.
Oh my gosh.
Unashamedly, yeah.
Well, you know what? She believes in honesty, apparently.
I guess so.
Good for her
I
for
guess so.
believing in honesty.
So, on Sean's behalf, let's talk about, in your opinion, harassment, stalking, terroristic threat. Do you think that she falls into any of those categories? You don't think she falls in harassment?
Okay, I take that back now.
Repeatedly sending us
messages. Let me think about it. 200 text messages a day definitely sounds like harassment to me.
Yeah. Now, talking about a protective order or a temporary restraining order.
No protective order.
Yeah.
I mean, the TRO, like, if she's drunk outside his house at all hours of the night, screaming and yelling, maybe, but.
So, and the judge ended up, they denied a protective order, issued a restraining order for both of them. And, you know, the reason being is that she's over there at his house, parked outside. She's sending him incessant messages. I mean, it is a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that was decided
And
correctly.
you can get a restraining order as to text messages and phone calls, correct?
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
mean, you can restrain just about anything.
Yeah.
If you
So
put it
I
on
definitely
evidence.
think that the TRO was a good option.
Stay
in that
500 feet
situation.
away, stop messaging this person, except through his or her lawyer, that kind of stuff. Next situation, the Dolce door breach.
Oh.
Kristen, this goes back to they thought they were dating situation you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Not Chloe and Tristan?
Not Chloe and Tristan. Kristen and Tristan. But I went with her. Kristen thinks that her and Tristan are actually dating, but Tristan thinks they're just hooking up casually.
Okay, that was not my situation.
I know it was. That's why it says a little different, less innocent.
Okay.
Because of that, Tristan ends up in a picture on Instagram with Veronica at a bottle service table one night. The thing is that Kristen sees this because she follows Madison, who commented on the picture, which was posted on Ashley's story, who Kristen is friends with because she dug down the rabbit hole of Instagram stalking and looking through. They're stalking in like the practical sense.
In the colloquial sense,
in the colloquial sense. Going down the rabbit hole of Tristan's social media history for the last 6 years.
You know what? Let me just tell you, sometimes you can really go down that rabbit hole. For me, it's usually when I start looking at designer shoe brands or puppy pages. And then I get like 6 years in.
I'll just say this. It astounds me at how good some people are at going down that rabbit hole in social media investigation. Because I guess I'm just not good at it or don't think about it, but I don't understand how they go from all these different points, connect the dots to find things like this.
It's like a puzzle. Don't you like puzzles?
Not really.
Oh, okay. Well, then you wouldn't
At least
like
not
this.
like this.
Yeah.
So naturally, after Kristen sees this picture, she knows what to do. So she texts a screenshot to Tristan, asks him who this hoe is, and says, I'm going to knock her teeth out with a bottle of Ace of Spades tonight when I see her at Citizen.
Dun, dun, dun.
Then she takes her Instagram model self over to Tristan's house.
Instagram model self.
And with her Dolce & Gabbana shoes on, she forcibly removes the door with her foot.
Oh.
Unfortunately, he's not home, so she waits until he repairs the door, comes back a week later, does the same thing. So we got a lot going on here. So, criminally.
Well, first of all, criminal trespass and breaking and entering.
There you go.
Yeah.
And a little B&E there.
Yeah. A little disturbing.
On our statutes that we talked about today, do we have harassment? Do we have terroristic threat? Do we have stalking? We don't have revenge porn, obviously.
Definitely not revenge porn. I mean, she's not sending, she's broken down his door twice. That sounds like it could be an argument for harassment to me.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
I could see that.
But for a terroristic threat, like, it doesn't seem like there's going to be anything imminent because he's not there. Like, they're not looking at each other. So I wouldn't think so.
I agree with that. I think Veronica would be closer to getting a terroristic threat, although she didn't make the threat to Veronica. So
is that really...
a little more gray area.
Yeah. I don't think it's as good of an argument as it would be for possibly harassment.
Right. Now, I will say in this case, we actually, the second time, we got cell phone video from behind the door of just like the door going boom off the hinges. And like, then she realized she was being videoed and, eyes got kind of big. But it
wild.
It was funny to watch her testify and then be this really sweet person. And then we're like, okay, Judge, but look at this.
But Your Honor, she broke down a door in her heels.
It was very impressive. I will say
I am impressed.
Luckily, I mean, as lawyers, we're supposed to be objective. Like, it was impressive. I would be terrified if I was the guy standing inside and that was happening, because don't know what fury is coming through the door. But okay, last situation here. Now, this is not from personal experience. I'll make that very clear. Okay. This is from experience I've heard through friends.
Okay.
And I will say, we're laughing about this, but this is kind of messed up. That this happens a lot. Okay. Call this one down in the DMs. So
down in the DMs.
Justin matches with Sarah on Hinge.
Wait,
and by the way,
Hinge?
quick shout out to Hinge. That's how Rachel and I met.
Oh.
It's an online dating app. So it's
you
like
and your GF.
Yeah, it's like Tinder or Bumble or whatever.
Okay, so Hinge is like cool, not gross like Tinder.
Well, easy. My brother met his wife on Tinder.
Oh, sorry, y'all.
Listen, here's my little side comment on this stuff. I think dating apps are used by the people for what they want it to be used for. You want to use it as a hookup app, you can. You want to meet somebody who you really want to establish a long-term relationship with, I think you can do that too.
Yeah, I didn't really ever get into the dating app thing, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So Justin matches with Sarah on Hinge, and he's got this specific sequence of messages that he's kind of just uses and recycles over and over again, where, he talks to her for a little bit, gets the phone number, and then he proceeds at that point to try to ask girls for nude pictures, and talks about other sexual acts that he wants to perform. This happens a lot. Happens
Gross.
A whole lot.
Why would anyone go on a dating app if that's what happens?
That's a good question for a poll of some sort.
Yes.
But it happens a lot, and actually that's the reason that's the whole reason. Part of the reason the revenge porn statute got put into play is because sending nudes has become a pretty common thing in society today.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So in this situation, he does the same thing. Sarah gives him her number. He eventually asks her to send him naked pictures. Now,
gross.
I want to talk to a couple different alternatives here to talk about whether or not any of this stuff applies. So let's say she sends the pictures to him, and then he texts those pictures to his friends.
Bad move, buddy.
Bad move.
Bad move.
So what environment are we in that point?
I'm looking at the revenge porn statute at that point.
Yeah, and we probably need some extra facts to show that he was doing this as some sort of, you don't have to show revenge, but with an intent to harm.
Yeah, so say that she'd been like, oh, I'm working tonight, an extra shift at the ER. I can't go with you and your friends to club whatever. He's like, oh, I'm mad at her. Oh, she's such a buzzkill. I'm going to send these pictures and embarrass her.
Yeah.
I think that would be revenge porn.
You've gotten there. And the interesting thing that people need to think about with this is that sharing this with your buddy is the same, that gets you into the statute. You have shared it with somebody.
It's the same thing as posting it on your IG stories.
Right. It fulfills the same element. So yeah, you're exactly right. You don't have to put it on blast. Yeah. You just send it to somebody else and you've got it.
Because the term publish in the law does not mean publish on social media or publish a book. It just means to send, essentially.
To show,
to send
share.
to another human, to share with.
Yeah. So, okay, I agree with you on that. Now, let's say he also, in addition to asking her to send nudes, asked her to perform some sexual act that she's offended by.
Ew.
Be objective here, Andrea. I'm not saying I support this. I'm talking about what crime does it violate?
I mean, if he only does it once and then she says no and he backs off.
See, I think it actually still violates harassment, and I haven't seen it charged this way. Yeah, because the subsection 1 says that he initiates communication and in the course of the communication makes a comment, request, suggestion, or proposal that is obscene.
Oh, okay. Well, then, I would say it does fall under harassment.
And I had to look back at this because the comment, a comment, it doesn't say repeated, doesn't say,
I was thinking of just the prong that talks about like repeated.
Yeah.
Okay, but then, when you bring that portion of the statute back up, it definitely sounds like it would be harassment to me.
Right. It fits
well, good. I'm glad she can get some sort of justice for the sicko.
Now, let's back it off. So he asked her to perform a sexual act there. Let's say he doesn't ask that, but she gets offended that he asked about sending the nudes.
As she should.
And then she doesn't send the pictures.
Good for her.
Yeah, I think because the harassment statute is still pretty vague, I think you could probably get there because she could still be offended by that.
Yeah, who wouldn't be?
No, I get it. Well, there's a lot of women that aren't, or men that aren't too. I don't want to make this one gender.
Okay, sure.
This is gender neutral.
That's fair, gender neutral.
Yeah, well, because there's a reason that Justin keeps doing this is because it keeps working. Fictitious Justin who's real in the world too. I mean, like, there's a lot of these are being circulated because it's become normalized. I know that may surprise you, but it has become normalized.
I've been out of the dating game for so long.
And I'm not in support of it. Here, I'll share with you one story. I have received numerous unsolicited nude pictures from women on dating apps.
Ew!
I did not solicit it.
Send them?
Yes.
Oh.
And it's been like,
why?
Okay. Because they've learned that that's maybe, I mean, these specific humans have, I guess, that's what they think that because of maybe they're jaded by the men they're meeting on those dating apps, that's what they thought they wanted.
That's so sad.
I agree.
Oh.
But let's get back to the situation here.
Y'all.
For the record, that was a long time ago, and I never went on dates with any of these women.
Okay. Rachel doesn't need to worry.
Yeah, right. Making sure we're putting that out there. So let's say this, and this is going to get a little bit more gray area here.
Okay.
She sends the pictures, responds favorably to his request about the sexual act. Not saying she actually goes and does it, but like she starts sexting back with him.
Like, ha ha ha, whatever.
And then she sends something back to him.
Oh dear,
that's that way. But then he says something else later on that changes her mind about continuing the conversation, and now she's offended.
So like, they're doing their thing, they're talking, and then he says, sexting. And then maybe he says something that is
crosses the line, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know, like something about like I want to choke you until like you pass out or something. Which,
there you go. That's a good example.
That sounds very frightening to me.
Could be a terroristic threat.
Yeah, I think that could be a terroristic threat.
With the imminent. But let's say that, he crosses the line after they've been sending some obscene messages back and forth. And I'm using obscene because of the legal definition.
Yeah.
He crosses the line, he says something that then offends her. Now at that point, how do you think her claim for harassment is because she's already participated in this conversation back and forth?
I think her claim is going to be a little watered down and harsh and not as viable unless he continually starts making these like, I'm going to choke you type things. And she's like, whoa, that's too much. So
yeah, I think watered down is the best way. That you couldn't have described that better because she still technically could make a viable claim. The DA's office could still prosecute. But they got to think about, all right, if I'm going to put my witness on the stand and these other messages have to come out because the context of the conversation is important to this. Yeah, it does water it down, makes it harder to get a conviction. But, the reason I put this last example in here, this is kind of segues into some of the takeaways here. People are way too cavalier with some of the things they send people in dating apps or even outside of dating apps. And in the moment when you're behind a screen, you may think, okay, well, I'm just going to shoot my shot here. And if she gets offended, no big deal.
But it could be a big deal.
It could be a big deal, and how embarrassing and how all that other kind of stuff. And so one of my takeaways is be less cavalier in your texting and DMing because it could get you into harassment charges. And
don't drunk dial and leave nasty voice messages on someone's phone.
That's a bad idea too. I have had that numerous times.
Okay, I'm not alone.
And then the other thing I think
alone in being on the receiving end. I've never done that.
Right.
I've only received the nasty voicemails.
That's what I mean. Yeah, for sure. And then just because someone's bothering you doesn't mean you're entitled to a protective order or temporary restraining order. But honestly, criminal harassment is a lot easier to prove than trying to get a PO or a TRO, which is strange.
Which, it's strange because a civil burden is typically lighter than a criminal burden.
And it is, but the definition, the definition of the statute is just so vague that it would be really easy if you decide to go haywire on somebody and text messaging and calling their phone, could subject yourself to harassment charges. And on the flip side of that, if you're being the victim of that, call police, file a police report. There's nothing wrong. I think people get hesitant or like, well, it's not that serious. File a police report. It's not it doesn't take that long, and they're not going to. Worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to take your information down, make a file, and then that's it.
Yeah. Can't hurt. It can't hurt. It can only help.
Yeah. And I guess maybe another takeaway I didn't put in here is not legal, is just try to vet these exes out before you start dating them, and then you can avoid all this stuff altogether. Much easier said than done.
And with that final word of wisdom.
Learn from our experiences, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening today. Stay tuned for closing arguments. And stay away from those crazy, soon-to-be future exes.
Hey y'all, don't go. We have closing arguments coming up for you in just a second. But before you listen, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if you got any value from today's episode. And please share the podcast with others. And if you want to interact with Austin or me, or tell us what you want to hear next, you can find me on Instagram at andrea.s.turner, Austin at The Dallas Lawyer, spelled out, or the podcast, #lawyered, spelled out. Look forward to hearing from you.
Texas Democrats celebrate a brief stop in Republican-backed voting restrictions, but they know this is going to be a short reprieve. In the Texas House, a Republican-sponsored bill that would restrict voting hours, add new ID requirements for absentee voting, and prohibit voting drop boxes has concerned Democrats because they would argue this would hinder minority and lower-income constituents. So, in reaction, the Texas Democrats walked out of the House in order to defeat the quorum needed for a vote on the bill. Governor Abbott is likely to call a special session later this year to complete this vote, so whether the U.S. Congress passes a reform bill before this special session will largely impact how this battle plays out.